We are doing the course syllabus part 2. So what we'll look at today is the second part of syllabus workshop. And I want to kind of touch on what we talked about before, just so that we have a kind of a more firm footing on what we're going to be doing today. So basically, we'll do a quick revisit of the course alignment that we talked about in backwards design, and touch on a few things about assessments that I wanted to make sure to reinforce with all. And then we're going to look at how to align the assessments with the learning activities that the students do, and then what you as the instructor are going to do. And then what we will then also look at is how you can do some modifications of your materials to an online environment, specifically your syllabus. And then I'm going to give you several other resources to help y'all do that, along with the syllabus basic steps that you put in, the resources and the schedule and all of that. And I'll have some resources for y'all that will help immensely in doing that. So let's look at, and please always feel free to post questions in the chat as we go. But let's look at the kind of the major points from last week. So basically, we talked about alignment of our course, the alignment of the learning goals, the teaching and learning activities, and the feedback. So you want to align what the outcomes are and the expectations, meaning what are the students going to get out of this course, but they need to be aligned with the way that you assess that. How do you assess whether students did learn and achieve those learning outcomes, and how are you going to give them feedback on that? And that actually is an important step, and we'll touch on that a little bit more in just a bit. And then you want to make sure that that is also aligned to what you do and what the students do in class. The assessment is assessing the learning, the activity is what they're doing in order to achieve that assessment. So we're going to look at today primarily the second and third step. But I wanted to revisit this image, the slide that we talked about, reminding y'all that what we're doing is we're developing our course backward, this backward design concept, where you want to think about what the students need to know, want to know, or understand from the course, skills, be able to do. Those are your goals and your learning outcomes. And then how do I check that they have learned those? And those are your assessments. So really, when you do this backwards design, the reason why we really reiterate the value of this is that it helps you to go back and double check, revisit that your learning goals are being achieved. And it helps you to refine those learning goals. Perhaps maybe, you never get to a particular concept in class, or you feel like you're not giving it due diligence. You can go back and maybe refine how you're presenting it, fold it in a different way. You want to reevaluate what you're offering your students. Am I giving them the opportunity to show their learning? Am I doing, are they doing things that are helpful for them and will help to, reinforce the importance of it, the application of it, and how can I change or reevaluate how I'm presenting it and what I'm having the students do? And then you're checking your result, you're making sure that you have proper alignment between all of those things, between not just learning outcomes and the assessments, but also the class sessions themselves, what each day is going to be doing. And so what this results in is that the goals and the student learning, and that's always the key, is better defined, and it's easier for you to assess because you have such good alignment between those three aspects. And so students get better learning and better performance because everything clicks, everything is following each other in this alignment process. So to remind y'all, what your learning outcomes, what they should be, y'all saw this image of what's important to know and be able to do, and the actual enduring understanding. And that's what you're trying to get your learning outcomes to represent. Yes, there's a whole wealth of information out there we want our students to know, but worth being familiar with, but there are some important key learning outcomes the course will address. And then there's also that significant learning that we talked about from Deef Inc. in 2003, where this is the kind of meta level of learning, where not just foundational knowledge and application, but the connections, the higher level thinking, the human aspect, the metacognitive aspect, all those things can be woven into not just your learning outcomes, but the assessments as well that you provide. So making sure that you, when you're looking at your learning outcomes, are there too many or are they too narrow? Again, look at them instead maybe as a class session aim or a class lesson rather than a learning outcome. And one of the documents I gave y'all was, it's called the Module Learning Outcomes and Course Design Tables. And I will be referring to this throughout today. So go ahead and pull that up, because I want to show y'all this is a really great resource. It's so helpful. And so I'm having y'all look at, make sure I have the right page. On page 1, this is one way to visualize your course learning outcome. So say you have this basic course learning outcome, which module topics address that course learning outcome, and then the modules themselves, what are the objectives within the module that address the course learning outcomes in those topics. So you can see how you can really refine how the different things that you do in class, the learning objectives, whether it's online or in person, this module, this is what we'll be doing, this is what we're going to do here today and this other day, that addresses that topic that then achieves that learning outcome. So, you know, use templates. Templates are a really great way to organize and design how you design your course, how you design your syllabus. All right, so make sure that you are still sequencing, and then again, that's why I showed you all this. This here is that you're sequencing all of your class aims, if you have multiple class aims, to an overarching learning outcome. And again, that really helps you to do that. And then if you have too few learning outcomes, use those as course week topics or course modules, larger picture modules, where you can again use that table that I showed y'all. What this allows you to do is basically you can develop both effective, both face-to-face and online learning, and make sure that your learning outcomes are achieving those either way. So you want to make sure that whatever your learning outcomes are, they are achievable equally between whether it's a face-to-face session or a online session. And that's something you need to look at and think about when you're revisiting your learning outcomes. And the way that you do that, we'll look at that in a second, really has to do with what types of assessments you use, what that end goal of that assessment is, and making sure that the assessments, whether it's face-to-face or online, are actually giving the students, showing what they've learned, and it's equal depending on what the modality is. So here's those assessments, revisiting the assessments. Again, what are the students going to do to show that they've achieved their learning goals? And so I gave y'all in the previous webinar a bunch of wheels and examples of different types of assessments that you can use to achieve different levels of blooms, different types of course design or course outcomes that you've designed. You want to make sure that your assessments incorporate really the gamut of what types of learning you want. Yes, so there's two different types of assessments. There's what we call summative versus formative. And summative are those end product assessments like exams and term papers. Formative are the ones that you do on the daily basis. You know, you have short activities in each class, shows them whether they got the material, that you can move forward, or you need to go back and revisit something. But they also need to be authentic as well. They have a purpose, and that purpose is, you know, trying and relating it to larger picture course content or experiential learning or real life or application-based types of assessments. It needs to have a purpose. It needs to not just be a waste of time, you know, something that students feel like they're wasting their time on, and you then have to grade them, and that's wasting your time as well. So again, you want to go back and revisit your assessments. The assessments in this diagram here is the teal color, the student products, essentially. And then think about how you deploy them. And so when we talk about deployment, how is it being deployed in class, you know, or online, making sure that this is something that students are able to do within a reasonable amount of time. So there's a lot of little things you want to think about with your assessments. So for each of those assessments that you do, these are things you want to make sure that you address. Also in the handouts that I gave you a worksheet. And so I wanted to make sure that, and I think I gave you all the older version that has the wrong date. I'm sorry. Nothing else has changed. I just changed the date. I apologize. The other questions you need to think about regarding your assessments is, what are students getting out of it? What's the purpose, the application, the authentic goal of it? And then are the assessments, these are just different questions you can ask when you're designing your assessments. And I'm not going to go through them all, but as y'all go through these steps for your syllabus, thinking about your assessments, are there other forms of assessments? How are the homework problem sets related to exams? How is feedback on student work being provided? All of these questions need to be considered for each of the assessments that you do. Okay. All right, and then of course, what's doable for you? I think we all have had the experience of hitting the wall and feeling like we've got so much going on this semester, it's harder online, making sure that whether you're face-to-face or online, you can have all these wonderful assessments and doing all these great activities that students provide assessment material for you, but can you get it all graded? Can you give them good feedback that helps them to learn? And if the answer is no, you need to think about which of those assessments I should keep versus drop, which ones are more valuable to not just myself or the students, but to our time as well. So those, again, are things you want to think about. So as I said, be sure how you know how you're going to grade and provide feedback. So this gets at the assessments that you give. What are the criteria that you're going to be grading them against? What does it look like for something that's high quality work in this type of assessment, but also for the types of students that you have? Again, we talked about that in the first webinar, not the ones you want, but the ones that you have. So criteria and standards for quality lab reports look very different between freshmen versus seniors, at least you hope so. So those are things you want to think about for each of your assessments. What is the criteria you're going to use? How are you going to provide feedback? The way that you provide, the system that you use to assess the assessments should reflect what the expectations are, the learning outcome. So when you're doing something like you're grading a project, the idea of the project is possibly the group work, the end result, the final synthesis. But if you're grading based on nitpicky stuff, you're not really getting at what the expectations of the assessment and the activity was. So make sure that you align what you're assessing with what the value importance is of that learning activity and assessment that the students do. You also can change the weight of each activity. You don't have to have everything worth 100 points or 50 points. Even things like check minus, check plus. You can give things less weight in your overall course grade versus more weight. It just depends on the value of that activity to the overall overarching learning outcomes and goals of the class. So think about different ways of giving grades. Letter grades, that's also kind of subjective, but that's a whole nother topic. Check plus, check minus, as I said, just all sorts of different ways. The assignments that I give my students in class, often I tell them we do probably activities at least once a week in class as a group. And the point scales for those range between 10 and 20 points, depending on how much work goes into it and how valuable I think it is relative to the other content in the course. Another thing to think about is peer assessment. So this gets at the idea of having students learn how to assess and give feedback and have a critical eye. I would keep in mind that peer assessment between your freshmen versus your seniors are, again, two very different things. So you want to think about, what if I have freshmen, what do I want them to assess? I can't have them assess an entire paper because they don't have that skill set yet. But I can have them assess, say, the conclusions. Do the conclusions match what they found in the experiment? So that's something you can keep in mind. And then you can have analytic assessments versus holistic. So, just kind of, this is what I wanted. I often have my students do in my geology class. They read an article online about why every college student should take a geology course, and then I ask them a couple questions, and it really is just getting them to think about the value of the course and what they can get out of it and how they can use it. And I just check it for completion, that they answer the questions, they put some thought into it, and that was more of a holistic assessment of that goal that I wanted for that actual activity. And then, of course, you use rubrics. Rubrics help you to be objective and help you to be consistent across all of your students, across your multiple sections. Okay, so let's look now at step 3. What are the learning outcomes and the learning activities that students are going to do that get to that result? So we're planning the actual experiences in the class or outside of class. And that also includes what you will be doing as the instructor in the course. And then we get into the content, the very last thing. So let's look at those learning activities. So this is, how do I get the students to do the learning that I want them to do, to achieve that, not just memorization, but significant learning at different levels of the Bloom's taxonomy, as well as that different significant learning from D. Fink as well. So how do I do that? So what are the students going to do to demonstrate that they have achieved that, as well as do well on the assessment, whatever the assessment is? So this learning activity is what they do to reinforce that learning, to put it in their brain, so that when you do assess it, they're successful at it. So it's done in class, it's done online. But these effective assessment procedures do typically require some type of active learning if it's to be successful. Things like online discussions or just passive lecturing is not active learning, is not a good way for students to actually get and learn and apply the content. Of course, excuse me, graduate students, I think teaching a graduate level class is a bit different because graduate students are more motivated to do the learning, but it should still be an activity that helps the students to start putting the the content together, the relationships together, the analysis that they need to do, that higher level of thinking. So on your worksheet, so going back to the worksheet, so this is now step number 4, extending from last week's, you want to look at your learning activity. So for each of your learning outcomes and aims, do you have an activity for each of those? And so this is something that you want to think about. What is the activity that will generate that type of learning that you're envisioning? So is it gathering information? Is it accessing resources, reading, listening to podcasts? There's so many different ways of getting information now. Don't feel like you're tied to always using a textbook. You don't have to. There's so many better ways in some situations to get information. Are they going to be doing something where they're observing, doing a experiment, thinking about a case study, all sorts of different experience of doing something that is similar to how it might be seen in real life or in an upper level course? Are they going to have, it says reflective dialogue, so this is writing, or this is discussions or blogs, anything where students have to reflect on their learning and reflect on what they're learning or how they're learning as well, a self-assessment of their learning, that can be a type of activity. And so all of these need to be something that is, again, authentic, that allows students to learn what you're getting them to learn, being able to think about it in the process, and even do things that you're doing both the significant learning as well as the Bloom's level learning at the same time. So those activities that you have them do can achieve multiple goals at one time. So here's an example that I like to show on how you can change your activity that you have the students do. And I was doing back in spring 2020, before everything went to hell, basically, I had my students do a position paper. And what this was in marine science, it was a controversial paper where they chose a topic that had 2 sides to it. They developed their side, supported it with resources, argued for it, argued against the counter argument. And that was in a 7-8 page paper that they turned in at the end of the semester. Well, when the pandemic happened, I had the conversation with this class. I was like, I know y'all probably have a whole bunch of papers now, because I know that many faculty or instructors moved perhaps projects to just a paper to make it easier for that remote transition. And I thought, maybe let's do something different. Do y'all have ideas of what else you would rather do about doing this controversial topic, because the students will be sharing it with others and it will be part of the course content, but something other than papers. And they were like, yes, thank you for asking. And so we developed a position project. And so students could do anything. They took that idea from the position paper and then turned it into a resource, an informational resource. So it was either a PowerPoint presentation. I got several infographics, really good infographics. I got a booklet that looked like almost a magazine, an 8-page magazine. I had a syllabus that was developed by an English student who wrote a syllabus for a class that would be able to look at different parts of marine science connected to humanities, and how to make sure you connected the two and really got the depth of marine science in a different perspective. So there are different ways to take the activities that you may have done, and when you revisit them, spruce them up so that they are something that students get more out of. It's more authentic. Students, in this case, they learned how to do infographics. There are apps out there online that helps them set those up. These are skills that they can take into other courses and into the real life instead of just writing a term paper. So that's an idea. What I then did with that, so I did multiple things with this activity. I then had the students send me their project, and then what I did was I posted it in Padlet. So this is Padlet, and I had a class page, and then for each of the students, what their topic was, I posted their project in Padlet. So then students, the rest of the class, could look at it and see the controversy and what the argument was. And then what I had them do is part of the last exam. It was the final, but it wasn't cumulative. I had them take the time, and I gave them the time to do this, to explore all of these different projects, select 3 of them, summarize what the issue is, why it's a problem, talk about the argument, counter argument, and a possible solution. So I kind of, killed 3 birds with 1 stone. I had the students do a different assessment that was more useful. They did better learning. They got more out of it because they had to look at other resources, and it was a more interactive, engaging learning experience, even on the final exam. So there are tons of different ways of doing these things. It's just a matter of thinking outside the box, and just really thinking about how else can I get students to do something that I've been having them do for a long time. And like I said, I asked the students what they thought they want to do, and they gave me this idea, and I've been doing it ever since. And it's really fun. I've gotten some amazing stuff from my students. And so the other thing about this was it let me achieve learning of topics that I didn't have time to do during class. So there's so much going on with marine science and controversies. There's no way to cover them all. I mean, that in itself is its own class. So let me help students expose them to different topics like that. All right, so back to your worksheet. So here we are at page number 5. So we've looked at the learning activities. Are they active learning? Can you incorporate reflective dialogue? How would you make the activity online for synchronous and asynchronous versus face-to-face? Is it excuse me, is it equivalent? And that is an important question to ask for each of your activities. And I think you all have done this as you've gone through this year to make sure, try to ensure that your components, the assessment, the activities that you do for your students are equivalent. They're not equal. They may be very different in format, but they're still equivalent in the learning that the students get and what they get out of it, its value, what the students achieve. So with number 5, what you now want to do is think about what it is that you are going to do, or finally to us. So you want to think about what is your role? What are the strategies that you can use to help your students successfully do the activities, to therefore be successful at the assessment that is done, so that they achieve the learning outcome that you wanted. Again, that backwards design. So what you want to make sure that you do is that think about, so you want to have the time for the activities in class, think about, instead of you just giving information, how else can students get that key information, that content, the ideas that you want them to get for those activities. So it doesn't just have to be online lectures. It can be pre-class readings, content on Blackboard, good websites. There's a lot of really good websites out there, other resources that you may have found, again, blogs and podcasts that can be the actual source of the content, and then that allows you to use the class time for the activities and the assessment where the real learning actually takes place. So that kind of flipped classroom type of model. So let's go back, let's go back to the worksheet. Oops, wrong one, here. So making sure that you allow time for that. How else can you do the sort of stuff, your teaching activities in class? How are you the other question you need to ask is how you're facilitating the activities. You're doing group or pair work. How do you encourage, your quieter students to work? If something happens, do you have a backup plan in your back pocket just in case something doesn't work? Those, again, are questions you want to think about. On page 3 in your design tables document, so this was page 1, page 1 continues to page 2. On page 3 is a really good way to visualize everything that we just talked about. So again, here's your learning objectives for that module, the AIM, class day, whatever it is. How do I assess that type of learning? And in this, you can put multiple ideas. So this allows you to really kind of hash out the different ways you could do something so that if one doesn't work, you've already thought about what another way would be. And then what is the actual learning activity that the students do? What am I going to do in order to achieve that? And then what are my resources? So this table here really helps you to design the in-class stuff, the actual working part of the class for your students, okay? And so you have that table there as well. And we'll come back to this in just a second. Okay, so now kind of going back to what we just looked at with that table, are all of these aligned? And so this table again really helps you to look back and see, are they aligned? Do the ways that the assessments that I'm using achieve the objectives? Are the teaching and learning activities aligned with the assessment type that I'm doing? And so that really helps you to visualize again that your alignment is working, that it is it actually is a good alignment for these different things that you're planning for your class. So also going, thinking back to what we talked about, thinking about the situational factors, are they aligned? Are the activities and the assessments that you do reasonable for the students that you have? Reasonable also for the time in the semester. You kind of want to build up through the semester where you don't start out with trying to get students to learn how to synthesize and create at the very beginning, especially if it's an introductory course. So again, thinking about how your progress through the course also is important, and we'll get to that as well in just a second. Making sure, again, all of those different components of your class are aligned together, the goals and the assessments and the activities. Do they all support each other? Do they reflect on each other? They're connected. And then do you have specific assessments and activities for the learning goals that you have? So now what you can do is you can go back when you use this table and see, looking at these, what you've got here, do you have all the learning outcomes or learning objectives listed? Are you missing one, or are you doing one where what the assessment and activity is doing, it's just really not achieving what you would hope it would achieve? So this helps you to reevaluate how you're actually doing the assessments and the activities that they achieve the learning outcome goals, okay? All right, so now this next part is kind of a cool way to think about, now how do I structure and put everything into a time consistent sequence of content. So what you want to do is you want to kind of think about, of my course now, going back to my learning outcomes, what are the major concepts, really what are the major topics? And so your learning outcomes may not be topics, they may be what the students are going to learn, and your topics may be overarching across your learning outcomes. But what you want to think about is, how do I sequence these through the actual semester. So what has to be introduced first? What do they have to know first? And we know exactly what we need to talk about first for our classes. What then could follow that first major content knowledge? What can build upon others? What is it that you should conclude with? These would be your higher level Bloom's types of things. And so really think about, do my assessments and my learning outcomes and aims follow each other in logical sequence? Am I putting something out of order? And so this is, again, visualizing it, putting it on paper really helps you to see that. Here is a really cool model of how you can actually design the days of the week, the weeks through the semester of what it is that students are doing. It's called the Castle Top template, and it's from Fink again. So what he did was he designed this structure for the whole semester, basically major course topics. And again, this is just one example. There's a lot of other Castle Top models out there. This one is, okay, so in class, this is day 1, day 2, day 3. What do they do in class, out of class? All of these dates or topics address the first topic, the first module, second, third, and fourth module. And so this lets you see, how am I giving variety in what it is they're doing in class and out of class, or is it the same thing every day? And am I increasing in complexity and challenge through the semester? Is it actually helping them grow in their learning and their skills and abilities as you go through the semester? So this type of structure really helps you visualize your design of your course, putting in where your assessments are and the activities, and seeing how they link together through time, and that they're coherent and they make sense, essentially. So let me go back to the worksheet. So you want to also make sure that you review your course alignment to number 6 in your worksheet. What we just talked about, do you have your assessments and activities for each goal? Are you giving them, do you have the time to give them feedback and guidance to help them make sure that they are learning, make sure that they are not missing something, and do the activities that they're doing help them get to longer term assessment activities? Is the activity they're doing in class actually something that will help them to be able to successfully achieve the assessment? Okay, so now now that you have designed your course, going back to your tables that I gave you here, let me go back to that. So on page 5, here is what we just looked at. So this is kind of the Castle Top design, but in a different format. So this then lets you see, how can I, what can I do or put into in class, between class, for all 14, 15 weeks of the semester. So this again is that Castle Top design, but put in a more usable format. So week by week, what is it that comes first? What is done in the middle, and then how do you conclude it? So week 1, what is done first, in the middle, and at the end? And then again, that can be modified depending on how you design your course. So maybe you have 6 modules, so weeks 1 and 2. First part of week 1 is what do they do first, end of the week, first part of week 2 is middle, and then the last part of week 2 is the end, basically. So you design it, you modify it as you need to based on how you've designed your course. CTE has amazing resources and templates for you. So if you go to the CTE website, and let me pull up the website for you, we have templates for, first of all, if you're giving a face-to-face course, is it online, is it blended? We actually already have the templates for those actual syllabus. So here is your online course. I've already downloaded them, so it doesn't take forever. Online course, it's the entire syllabus that you just kind of plug in what you're going to do, and you can modify it as you need to. It's a Word document. There is also the blended course template, and of course there is the face-to-face template. So we have these templates for you to borrow, plagiarize at will. That's what they're there for, is to help y'all design your syllabus and use a template to do it, because that will ensure that you are putting in your syllabus everything that you need to put in. Okay. Think about what could actually go wrong. And this is not unusual. Things often do go wrong. So think about, are the learning activities that they're doing achieving, again, the goals? And I've said this several times, and I'll keep harping on it. If it's not, why are you doing it? Don't waste their time. Don't waste your time. Are the activities or the assessments and the feedback consistent with the learning goal? So if you're having them do an assessment where they are really doing critical thought and analysis, are you giving them the feedback to help them really think about and move forward in their learning? Or are you just saying, okay, good job? That's not enough feedback for them, not for that level of assessment and learning that you're wanting them to do. Now, since you have taught, hopefully you have taught the course. If you haven't, ask someone who has taught the course. But think about, if you're implementing either this content or this type of learning activity assessment, what's something that might happen that you may not have thought of? What situations might arise? For example, the extreme being pandemic. We couldn't have expected that, and we now know what to do. But again, that's just an example of what might happen. It could be something as small as just doesn't work, or the technology doesn't work, something like that. Do the students get sufficient feedback, of course? Does the design encourage student involvement and interaction? And so everything they're doing, are they all just individual assessments, doing things on their own, worksheets? Are you having them pair up? And that, I think, is a really important component to consider, because you want them to build not just community, but skills with working with other people. And that is one of those overarching goals of a class, that the significant learning that Dee Fink talked about, that you can build into every assessment and activity that you do. Now, when you think about the workload, so online workload versus face-to-face workload, there is differences in how much students are spending online for the class. Do the students have time in the face-to-face course or in the online course to do the out-of-class work? And I think I had heard from several students and teaching assistants that during the spring 2000, several instructors would give them more work to do, thinking that, well, everything's online, so you have the time. No, they have 4 classes that are also online. And so you've got to think about, is the workload too much for students? And so this is a workload estimator that can help you to figure out how much work students are putting into different types of assessments and activities. So what this does is you can change everything here. It's just amazing how long, how many weeks are there, how much there are, difficulty, making new concepts. What is the point of their reading? Is to engage or just kind of survey it? Let's see, writing assignments, how many words per page, how many pages per semester, are they giving drafts, discussion posts, other assignments, hours per week, class meetings live, how long, study hours for exams, and it will then estimate for you how much time your students are putting into your class. And then you should take those numbers and multiply it by 4 or 5, depending on how many classes students are taking, and think about, am I contributing too much of a percentage of the workload that students are undertaking for the semester? And I think that's a really important thing to think about, because students are taking other classes. It's not just your class. You may have them be doing too much. And I know we all have had that graduate class where the readings were just overwhelming. And not that the readings weren't important, but they could have done with some fine-tuning and streamlining what the actual reading was. But that's just my opinion. So anyway, all right. Then you also want to make sure that the course is working. How do you know that the activities that you're having them do, the assessments that you have them do, are they achieving what you want? Are they effective at what you're trying to get the students to learn. And so there's different ways of doing this. You can look and see how many students, say you had an exam question or an activity, how many students missed that or didn't get at that learning that you wanted them to. So kind of using the grades and the percentage missed to give you feedback on success of that activity or what you did in class. Even student feedback, giving you feedback mid-semester, giving you feedback on exams. Was it too easy, too hard? What do you think? I do that on my exams, especially the first exam of each semester. I do that and say, was it just right? Was it too easy, too hard? Let me know so I can adjust as necessary. Again, midterm, end of term feedback. What do you need to hear from your students to let you know whether or not it's working or not? Are they behind? Are they completely lost? What do you need to know from them to help you adjust your course? Now, basically, now we write the syllabus. Yay! So you have that that template that I gave you. Also, we love our campus partners, and so our campus partners gave us some resources for y'all. And let me show y'all some of. I'll get to that in a second. Let me show you some more resources that we have. So in the CTE's website, not only do we have those templates for the syllabi, but we also have the schedule template. So every semester we provide for our faculty and let me go to the main page so you can see what that looks like. The templates for any type of class. So I just showed y'all those 3 syllabus templates. We also have the schedule templates. So we're Spring 2, Spring 1, online, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, first half, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday. We do that for summer as well. We're developing them, starting to develop them for summer and all of the summer types of courses. So know that those are there for you. This is what they look like. Basically, this is the calendar when all of the holidays are in there, when the wellness days were in there. That's been done for you, so you don't have to do that work that is time intensive. Let's see, what else? Okay, so those are your checklists and templates. Include the important sections. So this is what I was talking about with our wonderful campus partners who beg you to plagiarize. They said, take this, copy it, paste it into your syllabus. We have all sorts of different resources that you can put into your syllabus that address, lab assignments, reusing material, academic support, accommodating disabilities, assignment submissions, just lots of examples of what you can put into your syllabus, diversity statements, where it's already been vetted and approved by those offices that you can then just plug straight into your syllabus and not have to write your own, essentially. We also recommend that when you're putting your syllabus together, find ones, online or from people who have taught the course before and see what they've done. Use what people have done that works. Talk to people who have taught it and say, would you recommend doing a, midterm paper or something? And they may say, absolutely not. Whatever it is that they have learned, find out from them, glean from experience what to do and what not to do for that class. And that can really help you to fine-tune your course. If you're putting a course online, and even if the course is face-to-face, but you want a significant online content, Center for Teaching Excellence has templates, of course, for courses that are online. So what you can do is you can request to meet with an instructional designer who will then help you, will put this template into your course list and help you to set up that actual course. And we request that if you're going to do this, we want you to work with an instructional designer so they can help you do this and help it be successful and have everything that it needs to have. So just send an email to CTE at mailbox.sc.edu and request this, and we will have someone assigned to you to help you do that. It's really helpful, very, very useful to have that template. Some other recommendations. Remember that if you're doing online contents or blended, you do need to make sure that you emphasize and have your activities really stress connections between you and your students. I think we've all discovered how mind-numbing it is to be online all of the time, and really miss that personal connection between students and faculty. Make sure you have, a section in your syllabus about having the students think about, what are my goals for this course? Let me think about what I really want to get out of this course. And then also have your students think about what are good study habits, not for just face-to-face course, but online as well, and give them tips. How do I study for this course? What are my participation expectations? And then when you do assignment descriptions, some people put them into their syllabus. I don't, because that makes the syllabus really bloated, I think. But when you do have assignments, in the assignment instructions, talk about why you're having them do this so that they see what the value is in that particular assignment. Be willing to be creative. I came across this a couple weeks ago, and I was so excited to show y'all. So let me show y'all an example of a visual syllabus. And this is a really great article to read. I'll post the link to it in the blog. You don't have it in your slides because I forgot to put it in there. But this is an example of a visual syllabus. And what they did was they had a student help them design this. And let me zoom in for y'all so y'all can see what this looks like. Things we're going to read, things we're going to write, other stuff that helps your grade, late work. What do I have to read stuff? When do I have to have stuff read for? And what they did with this was they discovered that students really, when they actually read the syllabus, and then what they did was they had in the syllabus the links to the details. So not in this main syllabus for all the details, but they then had the content linked to it in Blackboard, essentially their learning management system, so that they could then see what the details were. So questions dried up, more evidence that students had read it. Let's see, what else did she say about it? So she did she did a survey to see basically how many students got more out of the visual syllabus versus the conventional syllabus. Group that received the unconventional materials reported higher engagement and levels of confidence. And so there's just really interesting correlations in here as to something that is not just text, getting students' attention and helping direct them to important content. Because when you have students look at a syllabus, some of the stuff they're not going to look at until later in the semester. So why don't you put into the main part, if this is how you want to do it, need help, then have a link to the expanded part of your syllabus that has the help and the resources. Or what you'll be able to do, this will be then linked to the learning outcomes. So you're not getting rid of any part of your syllabus, you're just rearranging how students access it. So this is just one way to kind of revisualize your syllabus. And then remember that I gave y'all, and I sent these to you again, the resources packets. So there was a bunch of resources on this to help you with each step. Preparing to teach online. A lot of this is online stuff, but teaching active learning, so what the activities are, how to write learning outcomes, alignment, helping you with your alignment, and then, as I mentioned before, the templates as well for your class. So use those resources. That's what they are there for. It's for you. But basically, I want to kind of summarize. This takes time, as you can imagine, as you probably already learned here. There's several steps to this, so go ahead and just start working on it. Plan for working on your syllabus, working on this course development. Realize that you will not, if you're putting a course online, it will never be perfect. You are continuing to modify it as you go, so having realistic expectations of what the students can do in class versus online. Prioritize student learning, not just the content, but skill building, habits of mind. I think those are all really important things to put into your syllabus, into your activities. And then, teaching and learning strategies that are manageable, doable for you, accessible to all, of course, and enjoyable, but also effective. And I know those are a lot of things that an assignment or activity or strategy has to achieve, but when you've done that alignment, it just kind of falls into place. And so now that you know what to look for, to think about, that really helps you to achieve those. Again, make sure that if you need resources, contact the CTE. We have all sorts of resources online for you to use if you're either face-to-face or online. We have all these different resources, distributed learning, rubrics, model courses, reviews, but then of course in teaching resources we have, where did it go? Course design and development. So all of the resources I showed you plus many, many more. So definitely consult our resources, consult us, CTE. We are happy to do individual consults with anyone, however much it takes. That's what we're here for, okay? There's also a checklist. I sent y'all a checklist. So when you put your syllabus together, even if you use the templates the CTE has, consult this checklist. Make sure all this information is there. This has been reviewed by the provost and has basically said what we want to have in syllabi. This is in this checklist here. So make sure that you review your syllabus, that it matches everything in the checklist itself. Okay? Very helpful checklist. I appreciate y'all being here on this afternoon. Again, feel free to contact the CTE. Thank y'all for coming.